Speaking test instructions. The speaking test is 20 minutes. There are 8 tasks in the speaking test. Please try your best to answer all the questions.
Start speaking now. Time is up. 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 Start speaking now. Time is up.
Vincent, this promotion opportunity sounds both exciting and overwhelming, which is completely understandable given the magnitude of the decision you're facing. Nevertheless, career moves involving relocation require careful analysis of multiple factors beyond just salary increases. First and foremost, while doubling your salary is significant, you need to research the actual cost of living differences between your current city and the new location to determine your real purchasing power increase. Furthermore, consider housing costs, taxes, transportation expenses, and daily living costs that might substantially reduce the apparent financial benefit. Additionally, factor in the emotional and social costs of leaving your established support network, friends, and familiar environment, especially since building new relationships and community connections takes considerable time and effort. Moreover, evaluate whether this promotion aligns with your long-term career goals and whether similar advancement opportunities might become available in your current location if you're patient. Although the financial increase is attractive, consider the temporary isolation and adjustment challenges you'll face in an unfamiliar city without existing social connections. Consequently, I'd recommend visiting the new city for an extended period to get a realistic sense of the living environment, neighborhoods, and local culture before making a final decision. Additionally, negotiate with your employer about relocation assistance, temporary housing, or gradual transition periods that might ease the adjustment process. You might also explore whether remote work arrangements could allow you to accept the promotion while maintaining some connection to your current location. Ultimately, this decision should balance financial benefits with quality of life considerations and personal happiness, since career success means little if you're miserable in your daily environment. 2 years ago, I faced an extremely challenging deadline when our company's main website crashed just 3 days before a major product launch that had been planned for months. As the lead web developer, I was responsible for rebuilding critical functionality while coordinating with marketing, sales, and customer service teams who were all depending on the website being operational for the launch event. Furthermore, the website contained complex e-commerce functionality, customer databases, and integration with multiple third-party services that had all been corrupted during the crash. The pressure was intense because hundreds of thousands of dollars in marketing spending and customer expectations were riding on meeting this deadline. Initially, I felt overwhelmed by the scope of work required and the impossibility of recreating months of development in just 3 days. Additionally, I was getting constant updates and pressure from different departments about features they considered essential, making it difficult to prioritize effectively. To manage this crisis, I immediately broke down the entire project into essential versus non-essential features and created an hour-by-hour timeline for the most critical functionality. Moreover, I reached out to 2 freelance developers I had worked with previously and brought them in to handle specific components while I focused on the core architecture. I also established a communication schedule with stakeholders, providing updates every 6 hours to manage expectations and prevent constant interruptions. Most importantly, I accepted that the rebuilt site would not be perfect and focused on creating a functional minimum viable product rather than trying to recreate every original feature. The result was successful. We launched on time with core functionality working, and I added remaining features over the following weeks. This experience taught me that extreme pressure situations require ruthless prioritization, clear communication, and the wisdom to accept good enough rather than pursuing perfection when time is critical. This detailed illustration depicts a busy public library scene where people of different ages are engaged in various learning and leisure activities. In the center of the image, tall bookshelves filled with colorful volumes create distinct sections throughout the spacious interior, while natural light streams through large windows, illuminating the reading areas. On the left side, a librarian in professional attire is assisting a teenage student at the information desk, helping him locate specific research materials for what appears to be a school project. Meanwhile, several adults are seated at wooden tables, some typing on laptops while others are taking handwritten notes from open textbooks and reference materials. The children's section, located in the background, features lower shelves and smaller furniture where a mother is reading a picture book to her young daughter, who sits cross-legged on a colorful carpet. Additionally, two elderly gentlemen can be observed in comfortable armchairs near the periodicals section, quietly reading newspapers and magazines. Near the entrance, a display board showcases upcoming community events including book clubs and computer literacy classes. Furthermore, the scene includes modern amenities such as computer workstations where a college student is conducting online research, demonstrating how libraries have evolved to meet contemporary educational needs. What makes this setting particularly significant is how it serves as a democratic space where knowledge is freely accessible to all community members, fostering lifelong learning and providing essential resources for academic, professional, and personal development. Initially, the librarian will continue assisting the young patron with book selection, whereas the people using computers will likely finish their research sessions and log off their terminals. Subsequently, the elderly gentleman reading newspapers will probably exchange sections or discuss current events, while simultaneously, the woman working on her laptop might pack up her materials as closing time approaches. Meanwhile, the children in the reading area will presumably complete their homework assignments with parental guidance, and consequently, families will begin gathering their belongings to head home. Furthermore, the study group at the central table will likely conclude their collaborative project discussion, while some individuals might check out additional books before departing. Despite the peaceful afternoon atmosphere, library staff will soon announce closing time. Nevertheless, regular patrons will already be familiar with the schedule and prepare to leave accordingly. In addition, the librarian might recommend upcoming community events posted on the bulletin board to interested visitors. In conclusion, this productive day at the public library will wind down as patrons finish their activities, thereby maintaining the institution's role as a vital community resource for learning, research, and quiet contemplation. Karen, I understand your inclination toward community service as a consequence for Jake's shoplifting, but I believe professional counseling represents the most effective long-term solution to address the underlying issues causing this behavior. First and foremost, the fact that Jake has been caught shoplifting twice suggests this isn't simply a momentary lapse in judgment but rather a pattern that requires deeper understanding and intervention. Furthermore, professional counselors have specialized training in adolescent psychology and can identify whether Jake's behavior stems from peer pressure, emotional distress, impulse control issues, or other psychological factors that community service alone cannot address. Additionally, counseling provides Jake with tools and strategies for making better decisions in challenging situations rather than just teaching him about consequences after poor choices have already been made. Moreover, a qualified therapist can help us understand our role as parents in either contributing to or resolving the underlying issues that lead to this behavior. although the expense is significant. Consider the potential long-term costs if Jake's behavioral problems escalate to more serious legal issues or impact his academic and social development. Consequently, investing in professional help now could prevent much more expensive and serious consequences later, including juvenile court involvement or damaged relationships with schools and peers. Despite community service having educational value about social responsibility, it doesn't provide the personalized psychological intervention that Jake clearly needs to understand and change his decision-making patterns. Additionally, many teenagers view community service as just another punishment rather than a meaningful learning experience, whereas counseling addresses the root causes of problematic behavior. The goal should be helping Jake develop internal motivation to make good choices rather than just external consequences for bad ones. Don't you think understanding why Jake is shoplifting is more important than just teaching him about community responsibility? Karen, while I appreciate your concern about addressing Jake's underlying psychological needs, I believe implementing strict punishment and consequences is the most important immediate response to his repeated shoplifting behavior. First and foremost, Jake needs to understand that his actions have serious real-world consequences, and failing to respond decisively sends the message that this behavior is tolerable or negotiable. Furthermore, at 16 years old, Jake is fully capable of understanding right from wrong, and making excuses for his behavior by focusing solely on underlying causes may actually enable further poor decision-making. Additionally, shoplifting is not just a psychological issue. It's illegal behavior that affects store owners, employees, and other customers. And Jake needs to understand the impact of his choices on others rather than just focusing on his own emotional needs. Moreover, clear consequences and accountability teach important life lessons about personal responsibility that will serve Jake well in college, career, and adult relationships where excuses and psychological explanations won't protect him from real-world repercussions. Although counseling might have some value eventually, immediate consequences establish necessary boundaries and show Jake that we take this behavior seriously as parents. Consequently, implementing meaningful restrictions on privileges, requiring Jake to make amends to the affected stores, and establishing clear monitoring systems demonstrates our commitment to helping him develop better judgment through accountability. Despite concerns about potential resentment, most teenagers actually respect parents who set firm boundaries and follow through on consequences, more than those who constantly make excuses for bad behavior. The community service option, while educational, doesn't provide the immediate accountability that Jake needs to understand the seriousness of his actions. Consider that Jake may continue testing boundaries until he encounters meaningful consequences that make him reconsider his choices. Don't you think Jake needs to learn now that poor choices have immediate consequences rather than endless opportunities for psychological exploration? Dad, I wanted to sit down and have an honest conversation with you about some concerns our family has been discussing regarding your safety and well-being. First and foremost, I want you to know that this comes from a place of deep love and respect for your independence, which I know is incredibly important to you. Nevertheless, we've all noticed some incidents recently that worry us about your safety while living alone, including the times you've forgotten about food on the stove and the afternoon you got confused driving home from the grocery store. Furthermore, I understand that accepting help feels like giving up your autonomy, but I want you to consider that getting appropriate support now could actually help you maintain your independence longer rather than waiting until a serious accident forces more drastic changes. Additionally, Many people your age use home care services or move to supportive living arrangements not because they're incapable, but because these options provide peace of mind and safety while preserving personal freedom and dignity. Moreover, Mom would want to know that you're safe and well cared for. And I think she'd encourage you to accept help rather than taking unnecessary risks that could lead to serious injury or worse outcomes. Although I understand your frustration with our concerns, consider that we're suggesting these changes because we want many more years of enjoying your company and wisdom rather than worrying constantly about your safety. Consequently, would you be willing to try having someone come to the house just a few hours a day initially? Or perhaps visit some assisted living communities that maintain independence while providing support when needed? We could start with small steps that preserve your dignity while addressing our genuine safety concerns. What aspects of getting help worry you most? And how can we address those concerns while ensuring your well-being? Carol and Stephen, I need to discuss Dad's situation with both of you because I believe we're approaching a crisis point that requires immediate family coordination and intervention. First and foremost, Dad's early dementia diagnosis combined with the recent incidents of leaving appliances on and getting lost while driving indicates that he's no longer safe living alone, regardless of his wishes or resistance to help. Furthermore, our tendency to respect Dad's independence and avoid conflict is actually putting him at serious risk of injury, fire, or getting lost in a way that could have tragic consequences. Additionally, waiting for Dad to voluntarily accept help is unrealistic given that dementia often impairs judgment about personal safety and need for assistance, meaning he may never willingly agree to necessary changes. Moreover, as his children, we have moral and potentially legal responsibilities to ensure Dad's safety when he's no longer capable of making sound decisions about his own well-being. Although intervention against Dad's wishes feels difficult and disrespectful, consider the alternative consequences if something serious happens because we prioritized his temporary comfort over his fundamental safety. Consequently, I believe we need to coordinate as siblings to present a unified approach that includes researching care options, consulting with his doctors about his competency to live alone, and possibly pursuing legal guardianship if he continues to refuse necessary assistance. Despite Dad's likely anger and resistance, our job as his children is protecting him even when he doesn't want protection, just as he protected us as children even when we resisted his guidance. Additionally, the longer we wait, the more Dad's condition will deteriorate and the more limited our options will become. Time is working against us, and delaying action won't make this process easier for anyone. Will you both commit to working with me on developing a comprehensive plan to ensure Dad's safety, even if he initially opposes our efforts? I believe genetic engineering for human enhancement beyond treating diseases raises serious ethical concerns that outweigh potential benefits, though limited applications might be acceptable under strict guidelines. First and foremost, using genetic engineering to enhance normal human capabilities rather than treat medical conditions crosses a fundamental line between therapeutic medicine and elective modification that could have far-reaching social consequences. Furthermore, genetic enhancements would likely be expensive and available primarily to wealthy individuals, potentially creating biological inequalities that reinforce existing social and economic disparities in ways that are irreversible and heritable. Additionally, we have insufficient understanding of long-term consequences and unintended effects of genetic modifications, making enhancement applications essentially experimental procedures performed on people who cannot consent to unknown future risks. Moreover, defining what constitutes an enhancement versus a treatment involves subjective value judgments. about what human traits are desirable, potentially leading to discrimination against people with natural variations in intelligence, physical abilities, or other characteristics. Nevertheless, I recognize that some genetic modifications might address borderline cases between treatment and enhancement, such as increasing disease resistance or improving cognitive function in ways that benefit both individuals and society. Consequently, if genetic enhancement were to be pursued, it should be limited to modifications that clearly benefit human flourishing, subject to extensive safety testing, and regulated to ensure equitable access rather than advantage for the wealthy. Additionally, any enhancement applications should preserve human genetic diversity and avoid creating pressure for parents to modify their children to meet social expectations about optimal human characteristics. Therefore, while the technology may eventually enable beneficial enhancements, the current risks of inequality, unknown consequences, and social pressure suggest that genetic engineering should remain focused on treating diseases rather than enhancing normal human capabilities until we can address these ethical challenges adequately. Mark, I need your opinion on something incredible I just found at the weekend market. While browsing with Emma, I discovered this absolutely extraordinary lamp that's unlike anything I've ever seen before. Instead of a traditional lampshade, this piece features a massive glass dome filled with what appears to be a miniature underwater scene, complete with realistic coral reefs, tropical fish, and even tiny seahorses that actually move around. What makes this even more fascinating is that the base is crafted from driftwood and incorporates real seashells and starfish into its design. Furthermore, when you turn it on, the light creates this mesmerizing effect where shadows of the fish and coral dance across the walls and ceiling of whatever room it's in. Not only does it function as both a lamp and an aquarium, but the vendor mentioned that the fish are specially bred to thrive in this unique environment. Although I desperately wanted to take photos for you, their policy strictly prohibits cameras. Given how much you loved that ocean-themed restaurant we visited last month, I immediately thought this would be perfect for our living room. However, considering the price and the fact that we'd need to maintain the aquatic ecosystem, I wanted to get your thoughts before making this decision. The vendor said he only has 2 left, so I need to decide fairly quickly. What do you think about bringing a piece of the ocean into our home?